Everyone ready?
This is the SEC Insider Hit. Presented by your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. Go local. Go with a home team.
Good morning. Welcome in. The college football playoff is set, and we'll have Michigan against Alabama. Love that. That could be a 34-ounce bone-in ribeye. And then also Texas-Washington. Looks like a good matchup, too. Our guests join us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Bundle your car and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent, favrates.com, in all 82 counties in the state of Mississippi. And we're going to go and welcome in Steve Deace, Michigan Insider, but I got to drop a little audio first. I think Steve saw this yesterday and probably thought it was pretty funny. Missouri head coach Eli Drinkwitz makes a joke about scouting Ohio State in the bowl game.
Well, hey guys, I got a quick phone call. Connor Stallion's beeping in right here. I'm trying to get some signals here, so I gotta go. But as soon as we get done, look forward to competing against Ryan Day, and we'll go from there.
Steve Deace, Michigan Insider, Michigan Podcast. Good morning. Welcome in. What'd you think about Eli Drinkwitz drop?
I thought that was the most serious analysis of this stupid story I've heard in the last 90 days.
Well, look, congratulations. Y'all made it. I know it had to be a blast to win the last three games and then, of course, smash Iowa and grab the number one seed.
Well, Michigan hasn't been ranked number one in the AP poll since the final AP poll of 1997. It's never been number one in the college football playoff rankings. Michigan will be the first Big Ten team because this is the final college football ranking. So Michigan is the first Big Ten team to finish number one in the final college football playoff rankings. And when you look at everything, the media industrial complex throughout this program, again, about a certain method of something that actually in and of itself is not against any rule. Is a certain method of stealing signs, which is not against a rule, or stealing signals, which is not against any rule. Is there a certain method of it that is? Michigan still is yet to receive any letter of inquiry or notice of allegations. The head coach missed half the season without one conviction. Okay, I mean this entire thing and everything that was thrown at this program this year, right and time right for when the hardest part of the schedule arrived. Regardless of what you think of these stories, I can't think of a program in recent memory. The closest I can think of this is Cam Newton in the bag. Did his dad take a bag to transfer to Auburn or not? But when it was clear that they were the number one team in the country, notice the NCAA was very quick to come out that year, if you remember, and say, everything's cool. We're on the up and up here, okay? Right. And then Auburn went on to win the national championship from there. In this case, the NCAA actually conspired with the media and the Big Ten in order to try to hurt this program. And these guys took every single punch you could possibly imagine. Go back and look at the Ohio State game in the game. Arguably the best player in the program, regardless of position, has a Joe Theismann-like injury there. And it's in the most important drive of the game. And this is a 15, 20-minute delay. They have to watch him get carted off. And then on the very next play, Blake Corum breaks free for what was the biggest play of the game, the biggest run of the game, flashes up to 6'5". I mean, this is an incredibly tough team. And they demonstrated that. And I think what people don't understand because of the way Michigan chooses to play is the amount of talent that is on this team. And in some respects, what you're going to see on New Year's Day at the Rose Bowl, and I can't wait to be there, is you're going to kind of see the original version of Nick Saban's Alabama versus the current version of Nick Saban's Alabama. Jim Harbaugh flirted with, let's have more of a wide open offense, and that's what we have to do to beat Ohio State. And he had his head caved in twice in a row doing that, and reinvented his program and went back to saying, I'm going to play how I know how to play. I'm not going to abandon my identity. I'm going back, like Rocky, I'm going back to the streets to train again after I just got my, face kicked in by Clubber Lang, basically. And so Michigan looks a lot like what Alabama looked like from 2008 to 2013. And it'll be fascinating to see those two versions of Alabama clash on the most scenic setting in the sport.
I can't wait. So we're visiting with Steve Deace, Michigan podcast, Michigan Insider. He's walked us through all sorts of Harbaugh stories and Michigan stories the last few years. And now they're number one in the college football playoff rankings, and they'll take on Alabama, as he just alluded to, in the Rose Bowl, which will be great. And then we'll also have Texas and Washington. And if not for our listeners, if not for the alliance that was created, which was a bunch of nonsense, we would have a 12-team playoff this year, and Georgia would be in it, who is also capable of winning it. No one else is outside of the top four that made it, in my opinion. Now, Steve Deace, how surprised were you? We haven't been able to talk to you since the last piece of the puzzle kind of came together, or however you want to frame it up. But were you surprised that Michigan and President Ono said, yes, we'll take the suspension, when it looked like they were going to fight it?
Yeah, very. Especially because I can tell you what they did to Chris Partridge, the linebacker coach, was completely wrong. And the media reports you have heard that he got caught destroying and tampering with evidence, tying him to Connor Stallions. None of that is true. There is no such evidence tying. I can tell you right now, there is no such evidence tying any other coach to what Connor Stallions was doing. They don't have any. And if they did, I promise you, Pete Thamel would have let off College Game Day with it already. It doesn't exist. What happened is there was one young man, a walk-on, all right, before he went in to meet with the NCAA. Chris basically, he said this in his statement. He basically said, hey, let's make sure we all have our story straight. Now, what is that story? Is the story dishonest? That we don't know, okay? But he basically said to that young man, let's make sure we have our story straight. And the NCAA asked him, hey, and threatened him, you'll lose your eligibility and everything else. The kid breaks down crying and says, well, Coach Partridge told me before we talked to make sure we were all on the same page, all right? Well, so given everything else that Michigan's up against, they essentially threw him under the bus and allowed a bunch of stories to come out. Like he was basically, like Nixon's plumbers, just, shredding documentation that he was involved with Connor Stallions the whole time. Chris Partridge wasn't even coaching here in 2021 when this started.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, he was at Ole Miss, right?
Yeah, he was at Ole Miss, all right? So they basically panicked and railroaded him. Maybe, who knows what get our story straight mean? We don't know. I do know that young man was very broken up about what happened to Coach Partridge. And then the very next game, just to show you again what we're talking about, the very next day, if you remember the punt that was blocked against Maryland, it was that young man.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like Partridge may have a lawsuit eventually.
Potentially. I could see it. Or he may decide, given the nature of this profession, he got his word out. It's maybe better for him now, particularly because Jimmy could quietly make some phone calls for him. You're in the SEC. You know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
That he's probably better off not suing and instead getting, there's no need for a show cause or anything here. And he's hireable somewhere else with Jimmy's quiet blessing. It's probably a better career path for Chris. But what happened to him, in my view, wrong. That was completely wrong.
Okay. What was we're visiting with Steve Deace, Michigan podcast, at Michigan Podcast on Twitter, Michigan Insider. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. As most of you know, Michigan, Alabama, 1 versus 4 in the Rose Bowl for the college football playoff, which I think could be an epic battle between Harbaugh and Saban. What did you make? All right, with what happened, is Harbaugh mad, or did he just take it, move on, and he's over it, and now he's like, hey, we're number one, and we're going to the college football playoff, and we may win this thing?
Yes. Jimmy is a very complex figure. I think I'm safe, given where your audience, to say this. If I made this analogy up north, they'd lose their minds. Okay, but he's a bit of a Trumpian figure. I think he is certainly more disciplined and than Donald Trump has been. But what I mean by that is, are there issues with Donald Trump in terms of doing things to make enemies that are unnecessary? And obviously, the stakes that we're playing for in that arena are much larger than this stupid game we love, college football. So I'm not making a moral equivalency. I'm making a situational one. Does Donald Trump do things unnecessarily to incite people to be opposed to him, to incite his enemies? Yes. But then do his enemies go absolutely effing insane in response? Yes. And that's kind of what Jimmy does. He does things unnecessarily to provoke people. But what they will do, like we were just talking about with Chris Partridge, like somehow just similar with Trump, like in my day line of work, we don't have to have like sources and be credible anymore. Donald Trump gives us an excuse to just flat out report things that are patently false, empirically false, provably false, regularly. Harbaugh does the same thing. Well, Chris Partridge was shredding evidence that he was Connor Stalions, the mastermind behind it the whole time. Chris Partridge wasn't even working at this program when Connor Stalions started doing this. What are you talking about? Okay? This happens a lot with him. And so on one hand, does he want revenge? Yeah. On the other hand, does he have a single-minded focus? I mean, you're talking about an individual. He is a master compartmentalizer, and that's probably where the comparisons between him and Trump end. Would benefit Trump to compartmentalize a hell of a lot more than he never does. Jim
True.
is a master compartmentalizer, master. And you see that with the team. They have adopted that. Their ability to set things aside, to focus on the moment, like we were just talking about after Zach Zinter's injury, and that emotion, you're literally hugging his parents on the field. And then you go right out there with an entirely reshuffled offensive line in the biggest game of the year with 20 million people watching on TV and another 120,000 in the stands, and break off your biggest run of the game on the very next play. And then on the next drive, you go for a 7-minute possession to wear down the clock. All right. That level of focus, you're sitting there at Penn State, which is the most raucous crowd in our league. You beat them. Yeah, you beat the brakes off them last year. You rushed for over 400 yards. You took their manhood from them. And then 30 minutes before game time, you find out your coach is not going to get an injunction to be there. We're good. I mean, that has seeped into the team, the master amount of compartmentalization. And that's even harder for young men that age with social media and everything else that's at their disposal all the time.
Steve Deace, Michigan insider on the Out of Bounds show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Were you surprised to hear Ohio State quarterback Kyle McCord is going into the portal?
Yes, but then I stopped and thought about it. Only one time in the history of the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry has an Ohio State coach been permitted to lose to Michigan 3 times in a row and not been fired, and it was John Cooper. Woody Hayes wasn't going to get fired when he lost 3 in a row, but then fired himself in the Gator Bowl a few weeks later. Okay, so every Ohio State coach in the history of this rivalry that lost at least 3 in a row to Michigan has been fired, and there's only one exception. John Cooper. And so I think what's happening to Kyle McCord, who is number 8 in the country in QBR, by the way, number 8. What happened to Kyle McCord is this is the de facto Ryan Day firing. This is the version of I fired all the coordinators. Someone had to pay for this. Someone had to be blamed. Of course, no one will stop and say, well, you couldn't beat him the last 2 years with a guy having maybe the greatest season a rookie quarterback's ever had. You couldn't do that. So why is Kyle McCord your sacrificial lamb? But here's the reality, Bo. You know why Kyle McCord's the quarterback there? J.J. McCarthy grew up an Ohio State fan. They offered him, they lied to him, and then they ditched him for Kyle McCord instead. He basically went to Michigan and said, I'm coming after that, out of just spite. Okay? So if Kyle McCord isn't all that, and I think there's a lot of quarterbacks in the transfer portal that in Ohio State's team could probably be number 8 in the country in QBR too. But, I watch a lot of college football. I don't think Will Howard's any better than Kyle McCord. I don't think Cam Ward, who's 50th in QBR and getting all these $1 million offers apparently, I don't see how he's any better than Kyle McCord. I don't think Riley Leonard's any better than Kyle McCord. Maybe I'm sure there will be names that are not in yet that will go in today or soon. But I can't demonstrably sit here and tell you they're that much better than Kyle McCord, especially because they're not going to have Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr. to throw to next year.
Right. Okay, Harbaugh and his future. Do you just think this will be an annual deal as long as he's there, that the NFL could come and poach him?
I think this is the definitive year, actually. There are several jobs where he has ties. Now I can't see Kevin Warren hiring Jim Harbaugh for the Chicago Bears.
No.
I can't. Okay?
No.
But the Chargers, the Raiders, these are teams and franchises he has very close ties, personal ties to. Whether they still want him, he is not the MO of the coach that's getting hired today. Everybody's trying to hire the Sean McVay clone, you know? The one team who didn't, my favorite team, the Lions, did. They kind of hired an old meathead coach like Harbaugh and Dan Campbell, and it's working out pretty good.
We love him, man. We drop his audio all the time. That guy's a maniac.
Yes, he is. He's awesome. And but I think by the time we kick off in Pasadena, Michigan will make Jim Harbaugh the highest paid coach in Big Ten history.
Wow.
And then I think what will happen after that, I can't foresee a scenario where Jim would sign that deal and then still leave. Could I foresee a scenario that it's still possible that one of those teams I just mentioned, who can remember, he's 60 now. He doesn't have a few years to rebuild. He needs to take over a franchise like the Chargers that has a ready-made roster to compete. All right. If the Chargers come to him and say, all right, we will hire the GM you want. We'll do everything you want. Okay. And you can move your family back to Cali and your wife where she's from. It would take that kind of, Willy Wonka golden ticket offer. So I wouldn't say no, but it would take the kind of offer that Jim has not gotten from the NFL over the last 8 years. And so I would say right now, 70% odds Jim Harbaugh is coaching the team next year, 30% odds Sharon Moore is. And notice Sharon Moore is not a candidate for any of these other jobs. That's just why. He's the coach in waiting at Michigan.
I gotcha. Okay. All right, we'll leave it there. I love the way you framed up Harbaugh. A Trumpian figure, but then where he trumps Trump is he's a master compartmentalizer. And
you saw that Saturday night, Bo, when he said, yeah, I can see Trump would not pass up the opportunity to really nail it in on Tony Petitti at that stage.
Right.
All right. And thus create a whole bunch of more blowback, right? Here's what Jim does. Hand this trophy to Zach Zinner, our injured All-American captain. All right. It ain't about you and me. He understands how to come off the top rope. He understands not how to just wallow in that stuff. And so he makes people who should never hate him. Trump does do that, unfortunately.
That's right. We'll leave it there. Steve Deace at Michigan Podcast on Twitter and Michigan Insider. His team's number one. They're going to the Rose Bowl college football playoff semifinal with Alabama. Steve, we appreciate it, buddy. Thanks, man.
You got it, brother. Go Blue.
So that guy's excited as he should be. They're number one. We get a little SEC Big Ten, Jason. Two historic, iconic, programs. Michigan hasn't, I think, and I think Steve would agree with this. They haven't played in as many big games as they would have wanted to, right? But they kind of went through no man's land for a little while between Lloyd Carr and Harbaugh, if you will. And I'm not sure Lloyd was actually an asset for the program during that time, but whatever. I think he was kind of Philip Fulmer-esque. But we'll have to get Deace on during the offseason and dive into the behind the scenes and why they went away for a decade or so. But bottom line is Harbaugh is so polarizing, but so talented and so good. And he has built this program into a perennial winner. Yeah. And 3 straight wins against an Ohio State program that had all the mojo and all the momentum and the 2 national titles in the 2000s, one under Jim Tressel and one under Urban Meyer. Undefeated season against Urban when they weren't even eligible to do anything. Things like that.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And I think last week we looked at it and Urban was 7-0 against Michigan.
He was, yeah.
Okay. And it took Harbaugh a little while, but he got it going. And once he did, Bartu called this, he said, Michigan's built to beat Ohio State in that game, in cold weather, physicality, pounding the rock, all of that. Ohio State's built speed to win the national championship. However, this is a different year. Every now and then we get an outlier year. And Bama's not dominant, although they're good. And Texas and Washington are both good, too, and give them credit. Washington had a much tougher championship game with Oregon.
Right.
How about Dylan Johnson transfer from Mississippi State to Washington? He had another phenomenal game. I think that cuts both ways with the MSU fan base. Good to see the kid do well. Also, what might have been, but he's in the college football playoff. So there were several schools that were, sniffing around, and he decided to go out west, and then the running back got hurt. What was that? Week before the season started? He wasn't even the starter. They had a big time running back returning for the Washington Huskies, and I think he took an ACL tear or something, unfortunately, and Dylan Johnson has made the most of it. But anyway, Texas was not challenged in the Big 12 championship. Washington, Oregon just couldn't get there. I thought Bo Nix, his press conference was awesome. Did you listen to that?
I did. Yeah. Just class. Pure class.
Well done. And I can't wait to see what he does in the NFL. So we got who else? J.J. McCarthy, NFL quarterback. Penix, NFL quarterback. We'll see on Quinn Ewers. And then Milroe, I don't think so yet.
No,
but if you're taking Anthony Richardson, who knows in the new NFL? I don't know. And as raw as some of these guys have been who have been taken, I don't know what could play out. Bottom line is he's in the college football playoff, so I guess the joke's on us.
All right.
And the one thing that I said last week when you asked me about Alabama and Georgia was Milroe's ability to extend the play.
Oh, his legs are incredible.
Well, what happened Saturday in Atlanta? His ability to extend plays was a big piece of the puzzle and a big factor in the game against Georgia. So we are the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Let's drop that Eli Drinkwitz audio again. Eli Drinkwitz, Missouri coach, having fun with the Michigan sign stealing scandal. This is what he had to say when he was interviewed about them playing Ohio State.
Well, hey guys, I got a quick phone call. Connor Stallion's beeping in right here. I'm trying to get a few signals here, so I gotta go. But as soon as we get done, look forward to competing against Ryan Day, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, not all coaches would do that. And Eli Drinkwitz, the head football coach at Missouri, just said, "What the hell?"
He's hard to hate.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess he is. Kudos to Missouri, though. Missouri and Ole Miss went in the portal, worked out. They're in New Year's Six bowl games. Ole Miss will play Penn State in the Chick-fil-A Bowl in Atlanta. That is an 11 a.m. kickoff. So we'll be talking about that, the Tito's Vodka Bloody Mary game. Good morning. Welcome in Steve Robertson a little bit later in the show. Are you expecting a defensive coordinator in the next few hours in Starkville? We shall see.